Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, our 34th edition in the Band Talk podcast series. I really appreciate you joining us, and I know that you will enjoy today's conversation. Our guest today is Alex Kaminsky, who is the Director of Bands and Associate Professor of Music at VanderCook College of Music in Chicago, Illinois. And for those of you who know me, know that I spent 23 years as director of bands at VanderCook, and the last 13 of those, I also served as president. It's a great college with a great tradition. And I'm so happy that Alex is at VanderCook, and I know he is doing a fantastic job, especially during this crazy time of the coronavirus. Alex started his work at VanderCook in 2019 after a very successful tenure at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Of course, Stoneman Douglas was the high school when, on that fateful day of February 14, 2018, a former Stoneman student returned to the school and killed 17 students and injured 17 more. During our conversation, Alex talks about how the band and how music helped everyone cope with this tragedy. It's a powerful conversation, and again, I know you're going to enjoy it. Alex's positive attitude permeates our conversation, and I know he is doing great work in preparing the next great generation of music teachers at VanderCook, and we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. Before we begin with Alex, though, I want to speak about a topic that we hear a lot about, that we totally agree with, but that we always don't do what we can do to help bring our thoughts and intentions into reality. And that is music advocacy. Music advocacy, we hear a lot about it. There are statistics, there are studies. All of those validate the importance of music in the curriculum, on how music helps to develop the total child. And those are things that every one of you who are listening agree with. And if you didn't, I would be really surprised. But there are a couple of things that you have to remember. First, you must think globally, but you must act locally. Second, music advocacy needs a music advocate. As a music teacher, you are the advocate for music in your school. Music, its place in the school curriculum, the school community, and the community at large is measured in large part by who you are and by what you do. I realize this may sound crazy, but trust me, it isn't. How you dress, how you act, how you communicate, how you present yourself within the community when you are not at school, and your social media presence are all factors that help define who you are and help define music in your school. Now you may ask yourself, is that right? And it is not about being wrong or right. It's about reality. And reality is what people perceive. And in their minds, what they perceive is their right. And I'm not speaking about constitutional rights. I'm speaking about their perception. And if they don't like or don't like you, then they are right. They are correct. Their opinion has been validated. Third, we are in the middle of a pandemic. And provided there is no federal bailout for state and local governments, and even if there is, that bailout doesn't have enough money for music, enough money for schools to operate on what has been the status quo, then you got to understand that cuts will be made. And guess what is one of the items that always seems to be mentioned when school budget cuts are on the agenda? Yep, you guessed it, music programs. Now, we can all agree that that should not be the case, but this is not about us agreeing with each other. This is about us facing a stark reality. Without some major miracles, schools are likely to cut or severely reduce music instruction within the school. Music programs risk being eliminated or being turned into a tuition-based program that parents would have to fund beyond the other taxes and fees they already pay for schools. So what needs to be done? What can you do? Well, you have to act. You have to do something. And you ask, so tell me, what do I need to do? The answer is something. Anything. There is no magic pill. There is no magic prescription beyond advocating for your music program. So here are a few ideas. Number one, work to improve your relationship with your administrators, not only in your building, but your whole school district. Send them updates on what you are doing during the pandemic, how music instruction is alive and well in your school. Send them recordings of students playing, communications you've received from students and parents, anything that shows them that music is still an important part of students' total educational experience. Number two, inform parents, especially those parents you know who are strong music supporters. Inform them about potential impacts that the pandemic may have on school budgets and school music programs. Encourage them to let administrators and school board members know how much their children are enjoying music, how music is helping them get through the pandemic, and have them talk up your work with the students and how much their students value what you are offering them. Don't be embarrassed about this. Understand that you are fighting to keep music alive in your school and alive in the lives of your students. In addition, you're fighting to keep your job. Number three, personally attend school board meetings and have band parents attend school board meetings. Just sit and listen and learn about what is on the agenda and what is being talked about. These decisions don't happen overnight, and it's important that you get a sense of where policy on certain curricular issues may be headed come budget time. I could go on and on about things to do, but in the end, you need to do something, and there is no better time than right now. So make a pact for yourself. Do something, one thing every day, an email, a text, a handwritten note. Do something that advocates for your program with either administration, parents, students, your colleagues, or the community. Remember, change happens when gentle pressure is continually applied. Don't wait until it's too late, and hopefully it isn't. Good luck. We'll be back with our conversation with Alex Kaminsky in just a minute.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast. I had a fairly interesting dilemma revolving around remote learning, specifically kindergarten, for my 5-year-old Timmy. He's taking his remote kindergarten classes on an iPad. The thought was that we could put a pair of headphones on Timmy and isolate him from the distractions in the room, and he could concentrate on learning. The issue with that then is that we can't monitor his lesson while it's going on. So then the idea that I had was to split the signal, but then the problem with that is if we put a pair of headphones on him and me or Jamie, is that then we are tethered to the iPad and can't attend to Sammy. So the solution that I came up with was to go from the lightning port on the iPad. To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, as our listeners know, I spent 23 years as the band director at VanderCook College of Music, and after I had a heart attack and did one more year and decided I was going to retire, there's always a concern about where the program's going to go, what's going to head to, and all of those kinds of things. And when I got the call about a little year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now, that our next guest had been named director of bands, I was just so happy because I had heard about him. Of course, I did my research, behind the scenes, and And I heard so many good things from so many dear friends about him, and had a chance to hear his band at the Midwest Clinic. And I just knew that they got the right person for the job, and had the opportunity to guest conduct the band last year at the Midwest Clinic. And they were terrific, and they were so well prepared. And I mean, I just can't say enough wonderful things about our next guest and the great work that he's doing at VanderCook. And I want to welcome to the Band Talk, Alex Kaminsky. Alex, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, the honor is mine, Charlie. Thank you so much. And I have to say, you have been doing a tremendous job with this podcast. I've already shared this with you, but you're a natural, man. It's been so much fun to listen to all the different interviews right from the very first one. I think you started this in March, right?
I started it in March. Yeah, I mean, just before the pandemic hit, I had a couple of things recorded, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit and things kind of got goofy. But well, thank you. You know, I keep going to the mailbox every day waiting for the bill to come in for the kind words that you always say about the podcast, but hasn't shown up yet. So maybe I won't give you my address. How's that?
That's good.
So Alex, tell us about where you grew up and when you started playing a band instrument.
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I'm a Florida cracker, I guess you would call. And spent my entire life there, except for when I went up to do my graduate degree at Indiana. And I was in music in elementary school. And I remember it was December of my 6th grade year that we took a field trip to the feeder junior high school where we fed into. And the band did a concert. And I remember I was hooked right then. I said, I want to be a part of that. And so the following year, I played clarinet, started in 7th grade. I think I was 11. And I rented a school clarinet because we didn't have a ton of money. And my parents wanted to make sure, as many parents do, that I was going to stick with it. And then that Christmas, I remember going to the music store. I remember this because it was so exciting, as it is for a lot of beginners, going to the music store. And we bought a plastic Yamaha clarinet that served me quite well, actually, throughout my junior high years. And that's where it all started.
You still have the clarinet?
I don't have that one. But when my parents saw in 9th grade that I was really into this band thing, they allowed me to be able to purchase a Buffet R13 going into high school. And high school down there at that time was 10th through 12th grade. So as I went into 10th grade, we bought a used R13, and that's the instrument that I still have to this day.
Fantastic. It's like a good bottle of wine, right? It just keeps getting better with age if you take care of it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's kind of like the old cars, the old Buicks. They used to build them like tanks. You remember that?
Yeah.
And this instrument's the same. In fact, it was in the Marine band. It was played by a Marine band musician. And so it's something rubbed off there, and it's worked for me ever since.
He got all the wrong notes out of it is what happened.
Right. I put some back in.
So what was your school band experience like?
Well, like I said, I started playing in 7th grade, and I was very fortunate, as many music educators are, to have very committed and dedicated band directors. And my junior high band director was actually pretty young, but he was super dedicated. I even played in the what was called the stage band. I played tenor sax, and he would basically arrange all the charts and just spend a tremendous amount of time on providing us with the best possible musical experience. I remember one of the things that he prided himself on was getting our junior high band to play above the level of what a lot of the junior high bands were playing. We were kind of playing at the grade 4 level. So he was, very disciplined, but just very passionate. And then when I went to high school, I actually, the band director it was the opposite. He was on his last job. But again, incredible experience. And he had formerly been the drum major back in his college years at the University of Miami. But he was extremely disciplined. And he actually is the one that really inspired me. He was one of those that when you walked in the room, and if he was there, nobody said a word. I guess I should think of it the opposite, is when he walked in the room, it was silent, and he demanded that kind of respect. But we loved him because we knew where his heart was, and we performed at a very high level, and that just kept us motivated. And so I played through high school, and then decided that's what I wanted to do.
So if your high school band director then went to Miami, was he in Fillmore's band?
Probably. I would suspect he was. And boy, the University of Miami has a lineage down there.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, Clifton Williams, Fred Fennell was down there. I mean, so yeah, he had some good pedigree coming out of UM.
That's great. Anything from those days that you can remember, things you were taught, things you experienced that you've carried with you throughout your career?
Yeah. I've already mentioned the word discipline, and you really can't be successful without it. When I went to teach at the various band programs throughout my career, there were always a couple of words or a saying that the band program would anchor itself on. And I would say the three words that resonated with me throughout my career were discipline, excellence, and pride. And so be disciplined, be focused at what you're doing, which allows you to then achieve excellence. And then through that excellence, you gain that sense of pride for achieving something at a very high level. So that's pretty much been my anchor throughout my entire career.
So once you graduated from high school, you head off to college. And was being a band director your first choice, or was there some other career path that you were thinking about?
Early in my high school career, I considered journalism and architecture. I was sort of leaning in that direction, and I actually still use those traits today. But we had a director change actually during high school, and as the band's drum major, I had to step it up, as many times drum majors or band captains have to do when there's a director change. And in assuming the heightened leadership role, I realized that was something I would perhaps want to do for the rest of my life. As I was sort of running things and doing some band director duties as the new band director was sort of learning the ropes, so to speak. And so by the time I was a senior in high school, I pretty much knew this is what I wanted to do, and I never looked back. In fact, I remember I was also the student conductor at my high school band, and in the spring concert, the band director allowed me to conduct a piece, and I still remember the piece. It was Symphonic Suite by Clifton Williams, and we did the first three movements of the piece. And the band director that had retired, the one that really influenced me, that I mentioned before, the UM drum major, he was at the concert. He was now activities director at the high school. And he came up to me after the concert in the hallway. I remember this like it was yesterday. And he said, Alex, what are you planning on doing in college? And I said, well, I think I'd like to be a band director, sir. And he said, you've made a wise choice. I'll never forget that. And that pretty much like that sealed the deal right there.
Wow. Symphonic Suite conducting as a high school senior. Man, that's tough. That antique dance will kill you in that thing, man.
Oh yeah.
That's a great piece, though. Nobody plays it anymore. They didn't
pull
it out.
Well, and it's funny because both my junior high and high school band directors were Clifton Williams fans, and of course we were in Miami, so that kind of is understandable.
That's right.
But
and for our listeners, it's James Clifton Williams. I mean,
right. That's right.
I mean, people call him Clifton Williams, but his friends used to call him Jim. So, yeah, that's great. And the other thing that you brought up, and I think it's something that teachers miss so much, is the importance of letting a student conduct, even if the student is just standing up there and waving their arms and just going. That has had a profound impact on me. It obviously did on you. And I think if more directors would let kids serve as a student conductor on a concert, there'd be a heck of a lot more music majors.
Oh, absolutely. And because, we teach in a way that we want to provide everything that we experienced when we went through school and more. And that's one thing from day one, my first year teaching, student conductors were part of the fabric of our program. I always, allowed students to audition and then to enjoy conducting the band. And it's a completely different perspective. because they sit in the band and then they get in front of the band and they're like, wow, this is like driving a different car.
So you're a Miami kid, but you end up going to Gainesville, going to the University of Florida.
Yep.
How did that decision come about?
Well, I visited a couple of Florida universities. I was going to stay in Florida, and Florida State was in the top two. But the difference between Florida State and the University of Florida, and they're both great, was that University of Florida had a little bit of a smaller program, and I knew I would be taught by professors, not graduate assistants, and I wanted to get the wisdom from the source, from those that were experienced. And so that, along with some scholarship opportunities there, led me to go to the University of Florida. And so I'm a Gator.
Who was the director of bands there then?
At the time, it was Jerry Poe, and he was there. I think it was my first 2 years, and then he left. We had an interim director. And I was actually, my senior year, president of what was the student MENC chapter at the time. Now it's called NAFME. And I was the student representative on the search committee for the new director of bands at Florida, who is currently there today, ever since. It's been like over 30 years. And that was David Waybright. And so I was on the committee. I always tell Dr. Waybright, I said, you owe me something because I chose you. Or I was part of it anyway.
Yeah, he came from McNeese State.
Yep, that's right. And I remember listening to his recordings, kind of like what you mentioned, you listen to some of my performances and so forth. And I remember listening to the recordings of McNeese State and thinking, wow, what he's done at a small university, I can only imagine what he can do at a large university like Florida. And he has. I mean, the UF band program is fantastic.
Yeah, I interviewed Larry Lang, Colonel Larry Lang, for the Air Force Band. That's going to be on the upcoming podcast. And he also was teaching at McNeese State with David Waybright, and he has such great things to say about him.
Oh, they were great friends. And they, it's interesting. They both went in different directions. Larry went into the military, and Larry is a great guy too. He guest conducted, I think it was my second to last time playing at Midwest. He conducted the second time I took Buchholz, I had him guest conduct. And he is just salt of the earth. He's just a wonderful person.
So tell us about that first teaching position after Florida.
So I went right from Florida actually to do my master's, and I did my master's in performance, having gotten my undergrad in music ed, and I wanted to sort of get a different perspective, and so I went ahead and did performance at Indiana University, and it's funny because we just took our son, he's a senior at Lockport, and we just took him on a little tour. So we hit the two big Michigan schools, Michigan State, and then we ended at in Bloomington at Indiana University. And I remember telling my wife this past weekend, I said, IU was the last place I was before I became a band director, and I've been a band director ever since. So IU was the last time I was not a band director, and it was a great experience. But I went ahead and did my master's, and then wanted to come back to Florida and teach. And I basically had an option between doing a junior high program or a small junior senior high school situation. And I chose the smaller situation, the high school, because I wanted to be involved with high school band directing. And so, and that was a fantastic learning experience for me, because I taught 6th through 12th grade. So I taught the first half of the day at the middle school. And then I went across the field to the high school. My first high school band, I inherited 16 musicians. So I had 16 kids in my first high school band.
That's 16.
That's right, 16. And then in the middle school, there were only 3 kids signed up for beginning band. And so it was from the ground up. I was like, all right, this is going to be whatever I make it. And I remember going around to the 6th grade reading classes, which were optional for students, with my clarinet and my euphonium, because I learned baritone. I marched baritone in the Gator band, and did the Pied Piper thing, and then recruited and got the beginning band up to like 25 kids, and I was like thrilled. And that's where it started. I had 25 kids in the beginning band, and 16 in the high school band, and by the time we finished, we had 80 in the high school band, and over 100 in the middle school band. So that was just a great situation to learn. The kids called themselves the little band that could, and they just I still keep in touch with. We had a reunion actually. They knew I was going to be in Florida. I was doing a Florida band director workshop, and they surprised me. And so we a bunch of us met, and it was just really neat. And several of those kids in that small Cocoa Beach town went into music. So that was a very special time.
And how many years were you there?
I was there for 6 years before I went on. And it's interesting. What happened was, and I tell music ed majors this all the time: when you start teaching, it's good to pursue opportunities, but I think it's better to allow opportunities to come to you. And I was one of those that I put my head in the grindstone. I mean, I just kind of, did what I could for my students, gave them the best possible experience. And then as things happen, people start taking notice. And so that's what happened with Cocoa Beach. People started, kind of like what I said about McNeese State and Dave Waybright, people started noticing, boy, this guy is, doing some pretty good stuff at Cocoa Beach, is a little small situation. And so then people started knocking on the door and just saying, would you be interested in maybe taking a full high school position? And that's what ended up happening. Plus running middle school and high school simultaneously was getting tough as the program was growing out, and they weren't going to hire another person. It's just the way it was set up. So
in looking back at that first job, is there anything you would have done differently?
I think, I'm a very type A personality, and can you hear that noise?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have these deck guys that are they're on the second day of putting in a deck. I don't know if that's going to be too distracting. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, of course, now they're doing this. Maybe should we pause?
We can.
Let's see. They stopped. All right. Well, we'll try to keep on going. I guess you can edit that little section out.
Okay. We'll do our best.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the one thing I probably could have done better is listen more. You know how sometimes when people say something to you or are telling you something that maybe you don't want to hear, you might hear them, but you're not really listening, whether it be a student, a parent, my wife, whoever. But there's a difference between hearing and listening. And I think one thing I could have done more back then, and I've tried to do more throughout my career, is really listen when people share a concern or an opinion, to validate what it is that they're saying. So I think that's one thing I probably would have done that maybe would have been a little bit better.
So how did you get from the first position then to Stoneman Douglas?
Well, after that first situation at Cocoa Beach, I was basically the person in Florida that was tapped to take over retiring band directors. So the subsequent programs that I took over were taking over directors that had been pretty successful and were retiring. So I went to a town in the central part of the state called Auburndale, taught at Auburndale High School, taught there for 5 years. And then I went up north, had an opportunity to go to Lincoln High School, took over for one of my mentors, actually, Jack Crew. And I was there for 7 years. That was the first band that I was able to take to the Midwest Clinic. And then another opportunity opened up at Buchholz High School, which is probably a program that more people are familiar with, because that band I was able to take to the Midwest Clinic twice. And I was there, that was my longest tenure. I was there for 8 years. And then Stoneman Douglas was my last high school in Florida. And what ended up happening there is the previous band director, who was close to retirement, actually had a heart attack at his home during the second day of band camp. And he it was a tremendous loss to that community and that program. They had an interim director for a year, and did a search, and it was actually a national search. I saw the email. The funny thing is that when I first saw the email announcing the job, I deleted it, because the one thing about that program was that it was very marching band oriented, and that monster sometimes is difficult to tame. And so, I sort of just bypass it. And then that year at our state convention, I had some directors from that area approach me and said, you really should take a look at this Stoneman Douglas situation. So I went and I saw the potential, the great kids, great administration, a pretty solid feeder. So long story short, I went ahead and took the job. Plus I was closer to home because I was in Broward County, which is just north of Miami. And I was there for 4 years, and I feel like I was able to accomplish with those kids and in that situation as much as I did in like 10 years as somewhere else. It was just, the chemistry was phenomenal, and the kids really had a hunger to succeed, and they surpassed every possible expectation I could have had. So that's how I ended up there.
So you were the band director at Stoneman Douglas on that dreadful day of February 14th, 2018, when a former Stoneman student came back and he killed 17 students. He injured 17 more or something like that. I know it's got to be a incredible, painful memory for you, and I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to ask you, though, Alex, is what role did music play in helping your students cope and heal with this tragedy?
Oh, it was huge. When the tragedy happened, and in fact, they just opened the new building that was built to replace the building where this shooting took place. I think within the last week, they just opened that building, and that's brought back some memories for a lot of the folks that are still down there. But we didn't play for a couple of weeks. And the question in my mind was, when we meet, what will we play when we reconvene? And I had 3 concert bands, and I knew I was going to start with the Wind Symphony with the older kids, so I could sort of gauge where they were emotionally, mentally, and so forth. And then I would sort of know how to proceed with my younger kids. And I thought, we need to play a piece that basically honors the memory of the students that we lost. And of course, you may or may not know that we lost a guard member and a trombone member, both freshmen in the program. So it was just very close to home. So anyway, I did a little searching around, and I found this piece by Sam Hazel called Southern Hymn. And he had written that. It was in memory of a band parent in Charlotte, North Carolina, that had passed away. And he was one of those, how you have a band dad that like everybody loves and he's there all the time. So Sam wrote this piece called Southern Hymn, and I thought it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was poignant. It had a beautiful trumpet solo. And so what we did is I talked to the students and I said, we're just going to read right through this. It was like a grade 3+, we're going to read through this and put it away. But when we play this, I want you to just express any emotions that you want and need to as you play this. And they started playing that, and they played it. And there was something different in their playing. And we finished. It was dead silent. I looked at them. I'm like, thank you. Let's put that away. And then we move forward. And then we have been slated to perform at Carnegie Hall for the National Wind Band Festival. And there was some discussion, and I talked to the band parents. I was actually very connected to the band parent board. And we discussed whether or not we should still do that trip. It was 3 weeks later. And I told them, I said, look, whatever you want to do, I'll do. And the parents and the students said, no, we need to play. We want to share a voice through music to the world. And that's basically what they did. And we adopted Leonard Bernstein's quote, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, and more devotedly than ever before. And that was a quote that Bernstein made after he conducted the New York Phil on Mahler's second after JFK's assassination. And so we adopted that, and that's exactly what these kids did. They just performed, and there was always, unfortunately, a point of reference from which they were playing, but that infused them in a way that I never had experienced in my entire career. I mean, the kids they would play to the audience, but they would also play to each other. I mean, and music, you can say things in music that you can never say in words. And that's what they were doing. They were pouring their emotions. And a lot of people were at that Midwest Clinic concert in 2018. And I remember being backstage. I don't know if it was Gary Green or who I was talking to backstage. I said, are those kids doing what I think they're doing right now? And I think it was Gary, and said, yes, they are. I mean, they were just performing in a way that I had never heard them play. It was just amazing. So it really helped them to heal and move forward. And I'm very connected to those kids from that band. I mean, we're Facebook friends, and they keep up with me. And there was a bond that was developed between me conducting them and them playing as we move forward.
I can only imagine. I mean, that's such an incredible, life-changing event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, your ensembles, I mean, they had incredible success throughout all of your years as a high school band director. I mean, you think about it, you've accomplished it. You got to, 4 times at the Midwest Clinic, and which may be a record in and of itself. I'm not sure. You performed for ABA convention, for National Concert Band Festival, CBDNA, Southern Division. You get so many dang things. When you did those big performances, what did you want your students to experience when they performed at those? What was their takeaway from all that?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted them to enjoy the fruits of their labor by performing at a high musical level for appreciative audiences. And when we performed at those conventions, those audiences knew exactly what they were listening to, and the kids knew it. So it was a little bit different than just playing for mom and pop, at school. And getting that acknowledgement from either their peers or others in the band world, was just icing on the cake. But I wanted them to be able to share their music with other people that would appreciate it. And the students, anytime they performed really well, when you see that look on their faces at the end of a concert, they're lit up and they're just like, man, that was just an awesome experience for us. That was always my goal, and probably the most educational experiences that the kids would have would be when they had an opportunity to listen to other outstanding ensembles, which was another purpose. When we went to like the Midwest Clinic, we'd always listen to the military band that was playing and try to catch at least one of the high school bands. One of the best situations was Music for All. When the times that I took my bands to the National Concert Band Festival, I mean, that entire atmosphere is so supportive, and they have listening blocks. So the kids, listen to each other. In fact, a good friend of ours, Dr. Tim, is the one that sort of sets the stage at the beginning of that event every year. And that's probably one of the most educational events that I would have taken my kids to. But that was pretty much it, just to really enjoy playing and sharing music with appreciative audiences.
So when somebody continually achieves at the top of their game, like you did with your high school bands, it can sometimes take its toll. I mean, it's hard work. It's taxing. So how do you keep your edge? I mean, what did you do to keep that level of performance so high?
Well, I mean, as far as maintaining that high level of performance, I think the first part of the answer would be to stick to fundamentals. And the further I went in my career, the more I realized the importance of fundamentals. And so we always, whether it be in marching band, visually, or playing wise, I always made sure the students were grounded in the fundamentals that then would allow them to be able to achieve at a high level. And so that's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer, in Florida, unless you have 300 students in the band program, you don't get an assistant. That's generally how it works. And so I flew solo for 30 years. And there were times that I was tapped out, and I had to kind of, take a deep breath and sort of refuel. But as I went through my career, I started delegating more responsibility to my student leaders, kind of what we talked about, student conductor, and allowing them to do sectionals, especially with the marching band, of course, as a lot of us do, and just giving them more ownership and trusting them with the training that they got from me to be able to do those other things. Somebody once said, only do what you can do. And I was the guy that, like, I would be straightening up the stands, and it's like, why am I straightening up the stands? It's like, that can be done by, one of our students can be responsible for that sort of thing. So I started delegating, and then also bringing in, I was able to bring in with some funds, some staff, especially for the marching band. And so I had, a visual guy, bringing people in to sort of help with that. I brought in a jazz person to sort of take over the jazz side of the program. So I tried to get some help here and there, but the students really were a large reason that we were able to succeed without this band director getting completely tapped out. They really, and I'll tell you, the person that's a master at that is Greg Bim. He really knows how to employ the student leadership program. And so that's something I tried to do, and it helped me kind of stay in it for 30 years.
What role did private lessons play in the process?
To be totally honest, I always encouraged the students to study privately and would provide a list of teachers and so forth, but I never really required it. And the reason was from personal experience. When I was in junior high school and high school, my parents couldn't afford private lessons. And so, I just practiced and would have an occasional lesson. I remember going to University of Miami and having a lesson with Bill Klinger, who was a clarinet professor at the time. But really, for most of the students that I taught, I was their only private teacher, and that's really how I taught band, as a big private lesson. Of course, as you went up in the program to the higher band, there was a larger percentage of students that would, take private lessons voluntarily or were able to do that. But honestly, the majority of the students in all of my band programs did not take private lessons. They, as we know, most kids are not in band to be music majors. They're in band for a different experience, a social experience, and to do something outside of just the academic rigor. And so that was it. I know some people require private lessons and that sort of thing, but I just never did.
It's interesting. You got your bachelor's degree in music ed, and then you went right away and got your master's degree in performance. And I'm just wondering out loud here how the difference in those two programs and the philosophy of those two programs, and how getting your master's in performance has influenced the way you conduct a band, how that changes that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because when I did my music ed degree, I learned the educational aspect of teaching. But when I did my performance degree, I really learned what it takes for an individual to excel, to play at a very high level. And of course, at Indiana, I was a big fish in a small pond at Florida. When I went to Indiana, it was the opposite. It was that I barely, they have 5 orchestras there, and I barely got into the 5th orchestra. It was all graduate students that played in the wind sections. And then I worked, and I got worked my way up. But what it took for me to play at a high level, that is what I apply to my rehearsals. So I learned sort of some educational philosophical things for the music ed side of it, but then that performance degree really helped me to learn how to teach the individual student in a way that allowed them to be able to excel. And I tell them all the time, I have my clarinet right next to my podium, and I tell them the things that I'm asking you to do that we're doing together, whether it's breathing, long tones, scale passages that we do together, unison studies in the band, those are all things that help me to get my performance degree. So that's sort of where the approach is sort of merged.
Was Howard Klug the clarinet professor there at Indiana at that time?
No, he came after me, because I was there in '88, and he came shortly thereafter.
Okay, so like all of us, I'm sure there's others in our field, that we owe so much to, people that came in when we were young flailing band directors, or even after we had a lot of experience, and they took the time to work with us. They work with our students. They helped our kids grow. They helped us grow, not only as musicians and as people. And I'm sure you've had a lot of those along the way too. So who are those people that are on your Mount Rushmore of band directors?
Yikes, that's a pretty long list, Charlie. It's like, it's funny because during this pandemic, I've actually had some time to look back over my career. I've sort of been reminiscing, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but there are maybe a few people. One would be Gary Green. When I was at Stoneman Douglas, Gary lives in Pembroke Pines, which is about 30 to 45 minutes south of Stoneman Douglas, and he also worked with my Buchholz band. And Gary is a gem of a person, and he was always encouraging me, and watching him work with my students and what he would get them to do was inspiring to me. And he conducted a couple of times for Midwest, and he conducted in that very last performance with Stoneman Douglas at the Midwest Clinic. So he's a big one. Joe Kreines, who you may or may not know.
Yes.
But Joe Kreines actually went to the University of Chicago, and then basically in Florida, he clinic bands. That's basically what he did. He went from band room to band room, and he was there my very first year teaching in 1989. And he's a genius. He's a Percy Grainger aficionado, and he was an incredible resource for me and for my students. And every time he worked with a band of mine, they would have taken a huge step forward after he finished with them. It was great, and he really helped me with literature selection. He wrote a book called Music for Concert Band. There's not a bad piece in that book. I mean, they're all outstanding pieces of literature, and so he really guided me in that regard. The person that I took over at Lincoln High School, Jack Prue, he was a mentor, and he's a legend in Florida. But he had a way of knowing how to get a band to sound incredible with resonance, transparency. And so I learned a lot from him. In fact, the first semester when I was at Lincoln High School, he and I were there together. He was retiring, but he needed to go till December to fulfill his full pension, whatever he needed to do. And the principal, who had been a music major at University of Southern Mississippi, worked it out so that we could both be there full time. So I was sort of his apprentice and learned a lot from him. So he was huge. Bobby Adams is another one. He was a band director at Stetson High School. And before that, he was at Leon High School in Tallahassee, and just an incredible musician. He was actually a pianist, and he taught at Stetson University, was there for many years. And he really influenced me in the profundity of music making, like how to really dig deep into a score and get students to be incredibly musical. So he was another one that would be on that Mount Rushmore list. Another one I would mention would be Ivan Wansley, which probably most people don't know, but he's actually an ASBDA member in Florida, and he's one of those that is an incredible teacher. I would watch him when I was interning, judging for solo and ensemble. I would watch him work one-on-one with a student, and the way he would communicate concepts were so clear and so effective. And he actually is the one that started the How to Fix It series, which you may have heard about. But at our state convention, we have a sort of a guinea pig band. And then Ivan and myself and one or two others would rehearse the band in front of a room full of band directors, addressing some specific concept. Like it could be intonation, it could be transparency, it could be whatever it is, any aspect of rehearsing. So he's the one that started that. So he is really a teacher's teacher. So he was really good. So I mean, those would be the main ones. Of course, my college band directors, Dave Wabright, Ray Kramer, very influential. A lot of the Florida College band directors, at FSU, you have Pat Dunnigan and Rick Clary. They work with my bands. Gordon Brock, who recently retired from North Florida, he was fantastic. John Carmichael, who recently retired from USF, he's another one. He was followed by Matt McCutcheon, who's doing a great job down there. Rob Carnahan, who followed Gary Green at UM, and he was also very connected to the Stoneman Douglas band program. So, I mean, all those guys, I mean, the list could go on forever. I do have to mention one other person, Alfred Watkins. Alfred and I talked that we looked at each other and we called each other lifers, because, and even though I'm teaching at VanderCook, I kind of still consider myself sort of a high school band director, because that's what I did for 30 years, and Alfred is the same way. I mean, he's a lifer. He's teaching other people how to do what he did. But we're still in the Lifers Club. Greg Bim is in that club, and he was great because along my career, he gave me great advice, because he'd been there before me. And he was one of the ones that I talked to about VanderCook, as a matter of fact, before I took the job. But he was the clinician my 30th year for the Symphonic Band Camp at Stoneman Douglas. I always bring in a headline clinician, and Alfred came down. And boy, he was the right person at the right time, just what those kids needed. So I have a tremendous amount of respect, as many do, for Alfred Watkins.
Yeah, he's a good one. So
Yeah.
after 30 years, you end your teaching career in Florida, you pack up your family, you head to Chicago, where you assumed the position as director of bands and associate professor of music at VanderCook. What was your motivation for moving from high school to college?
Well, this is an interesting story, because I never had any intention on teaching at the college level. And I figured I was going to retire at Stoneman Douglas. I was just going to keep going, see my son through the program. He was a sophomore at the time, and just keep going until, I couldn't go any further. So that was my plan. And then in February of 2019, I got this email from VanderCook, from the chair of the search committee. And the email just said, Mr. Kaminsky, just want to make sure that you're aware that the director of bands position at VanderCook College of Music is open. And my first thought was, well, that's nice, but I don't really want to teach college. But then I opened up the job description, and I saw what it was. And essentially it was training future band directors. It was a very different job description than you would normally see in, I guess, what you would consider a mainstream, large university. It was a different function. So that tweaked my interest, and after, some prayer and talking with my wife and my family, I decided to check it out. So I threw my name into the hat, and they told me, well, if you're one of the two finalists, we'll have you come up. And so I just sort of forgot about it for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, well, they're not, this isn't going to happen. And lo and behold, I got the phone call. You're one of the two finalists. We'd like for you to come up. And it was one of those things that I was almost, as I go through my career, I'm a man of faith. And there's a saying that a pastor years ago shared in a service that I never forgot. And he would say, if it's faith, it flows. If it's not, it's forced. If it's forced, it's not faith. It has to flow. And so I never wanted to force anything. So I was almost pushing against this, just because, I'm a high school band director. This is what I do. So when I got the call, I said, well, I'm preparing my band for the state assessment, and I really can't leave during this time, unless it happens to fall during our spring break. That would be the only possibility. And I said, what date did you want me to come up? and the date fell right in the middle of our spring break. So there was no excuse for me to not go and check it out. And so I went up there, and the more I saw and the more I found out, the more I was like, wow, this is amazing. I remember getting in front of the VanderCook band, and I always have the band sing a reference pitch without giving them a reference pitch. So I always have them sing a concert F. And I remember, okay, well, let's just sing a concert F on the syllable da. And I remember having them do that. And it was like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I was like, what? That it was like the best first note I'd ever heard any band sing in front of me. And I said, how many of you are in choir? And like every hand went up. And I'm like, okay, now I'm interested. And like, you're all in choir? And they're like, yeah, we're required to be in choir. And so the more I found out, the more I realized, wow, I think this is a door that has opened for a reason. And so now my mission is to share as much as I can from my 30 years of experience to try to create as many incredible band directors as I can, and so that's where I was sold.
That's great. That's the right reason, man. That's the right reason. You have nailed it. You hit the bullseye. I had, like I mentioned in my intro, I had the honor of conducting the band at the 2019 Midwest Clinic. And thank you very much for extending the invitation. That was very kind and generous and considerate
Absolutely.
of you. And I had a ball with them. They were wonderful. But how different was it to get the VanderCook College band ready in your first year at that school than it would have been when you brought your own high school band?
Well, it's definitely a different animal. One of the things which about VanderCook is about a third of the band is comprised of students that are playing on a secondary instrument. So I don't even think I had a French horn player in that band. I had like two violinists, a choir major, and I forget what the other one was, a woodwind player. But that was a challenge because you also had players that were on their primary instruments that were pretty good. So balancing that was challenging. But again, I went right back to fundamentals. And so I pumped that band with like fundamentals like nobody's business. Because I knew I was essentially in some ways teaching beginners. But because they're already musicians, the learning curve is a different learning curve. So they pick up on things more quickly. So it was fundamentals, and then rehearse. It's funny because, we do that first concert is the Prism concert. And I always would tell my students, even in high school, that I'm not interested in hearing them play music if they can't play a concert F well. It's like, why do I want to hear you play music badly if we can't, And so we were pounding fundamentals and chorales and lip slurs and scales and all this stuff. And we had read Viva Musica, which is what we opened the concert with at the Midwest Clinic. And so this Prism concert was coming up, and it was about a week and a half before, and we hadn't touched it. So a couple of the kids came up to me and they're like, Professor Kaminsky, we have this concert. It's like in a week and we haven't rehearsed this piece. I'm like, I know. It's like, trust me, So then Friday, which was a week and 2 days before the concert, we pulled the piece out, we played through it, and it was half decent. I mean, it was much better than it was the last time we'd hit it. And I stopped, I looked at them and I'm like, do you believe? It's all about the fundamentals. And then we rehearsed it that week and they did a great job with it, but again, it's going back to those fundamentals. You can't, the people think the shortest point between the shortest distance between 2 points is the shortcut, but it's not. That's the longest way to get there,
Yeah. Sometimes the long cut is the shortcut, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I really, did that. But then as we got closer and closer to the performance, those fundamentals were kicking in and it went, they really surpassed my expectations that first time out. And so I was very excited, and it was great to have you as part of that. I really wanted you to be a part of that first concert.
I was honored. I remember my first year, way back when, 76, 85, 94. And the band had gotten to the point where they had to bring in a bunch of ringers in order to make it through the concert at Midwest. And I remember it was about the middle of November, and this baritone saxophone player came up to me and he says, "When are you going to bring in the ringers?" And I said, "You are the ringer."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
we've both been there. God, and I'm so proud of you, man. I think you're just doing fantastic. But this year, there's no Midwest Clinic. I mean, COVID has kind of put a damper on that. In fact, you probably, like so many other places, had to end up your first year teaching virtually.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that you did something really unique in order to keep the education part of music education going in the band. And you had you were doing something with repertoire. Talk to us about that, will you?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I always tell the VanderCook students is that I'm trying to teach them all the things that I learned in my first 10 years of teaching before they graduate. And when I judge around the country, one of the things that I hear is a hodgepodge of music that's performed, and a lot of times it's just not great literature that's being played, and it's because the students aren't aware of some of the great literature, like what Joe Krynas did for me. So what I did is I pivoted, and I decided to do a survey of school band repertoire. And so what we did in the spring with our symphonic band is I assigned them, we did some listening together, and then I assigned them anywhere between 3 and 5 pieces to listen to for the following week. And they would just write some bullet points, listening to the pieces and just give me some bullet points. Okay, march style, or beautiful lyrical piece with French horn lead, or whatever. I said, just give me some bullet points, and then we'll talk about it the following week. And I would ask them, how many of you were familiar with any of these pieces before, we listened to them? And 99% of them were not familiar with like any of them. I went back to Hymn for Band by Hugh Stewart, some of that Clifton Williams stuff that I mentioned. I mean, just Claire Grundman. I mean, that was a huge, Little English Suite by Claire Grundman. A lot of people don't know that. There's just some great music that has been completely forgotten. And I think young directors, generally go online and they click on whatever the current piece is, whatever is hot, and they kind of go there, which is fine, but there's a lot of great literature. So basically, when we finished that session, they had 50 pieces in their back pocket that they could teach on day one of a middle school situation or a high school situation, just quality literature. And so now what I'm trying to figure out is how I can incorporate that as I move forward. I did the same thing with the grad band over the summer. But the cool thing with the grad band is, because the majority of them are band directors, they also provided some titles. And so one of the students actually came up with this shared Excel file. And those guys came away with like over 100 pieces, most of them really high quality. Some of them were just concert pieces, but the literature is the curriculum. What we put in front of our kids is the nutrition, and it needs to be good nutrition. And so I think that short of being able to play that music, I basically brought the music to them. And I think as far as literature choices, those kids that experience that are going to be in a much better place when they start teaching on day one as band directors. So that's what we did.
That's a book right there. You got a book waiting for you. You're going to have your first book written.
Well, what we're doing right now, I mentioned to you, we've been actually rehearsing outside. The weather has been nice up to this point. It's probably going to, get too cold now. And we've been, again, I was trying to figure out, what are we going to do? I know a lot of university guys have gone to chamber music. Well, our students actually in seminar, they play chamber music, and I teach an honors chamber woodwinds class. So they're kind of getting some of that. And I thought, what can benefit them? And with the rise in flex band music, I thought, and also the instrumentation, which is fluctuating, it's fluctuating for all of us. Like, I have sort of popcorn attendance. What happens is, like, you have a student that gets exposed to somebody in their apartment that's not at VanderCook that tested positive. So then they have to quarantine, whatever. So I thought, what can we do? I said, well, let's just do a unit this semester on flex band music. So we've been playing some really well arranged flex band music. A lot of it done by Hal Leonard. Mike Sweeney does a great job with that. Jim Curnow, Johnny Vinson, and Mike Sweeney did the second and sixth movement of Lincolnshire Posy. And my thing is, I don't like to play watered down things, but to expose young students to outstanding literature, as long as it maintains the structure and the harmonic integrity of the piece, I'm okay with using the flex band music, especially now, because it's so necessary. And honestly, when our kids start teaching, rarely do you walk into a situation where you have perfect instrumentation. So probably they're going to be using, this music when they start teaching. And what better way to get familiar with it than to play it, So that's so we've got like 10 or 12 pieces that we're going through right now.
Yeah, the wind band, I mean, it's still in its infancy when you compare it to the orchestra. So the amount of our repertoire, the amount of our quality repertoire that we have in the wind band world is pale in comparison to the orchestra world. And now we're starting to finally get to the point where there's been pieces that have withstood the test of time. I'm so glad that like our orchestra people have been doing for years, they take some of those great works and try to make it available for kids at the grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 level. And it's great that they're doing that with the band. And like you say, the flex band thing it works perfectly in so many situations. And I really encourage people that if they want to start a chamber music program at their school, those flex band pieces work great, man. 5 different instruments together and let those kids rock on.
Oh, yeah. And, one of the benefits that the students have mentioned is that because like flex band music, you may have 5 wind parts. On part 2, you may have clarinet and trumpet playing the same part. My students have said it's kind of helped their listening because they're listening to instruments they normally wouldn't be listening to as they're playing. So it's sort of opened up their hearing in a different way. So there's been some good byproducts there.
Of course, being from Miami, and you obviously knew Dr. Reed, Alfred Reed, and I talked to him one time about his highlights from The Music Man. That's such a great little set of works. And I said, what makes that so special? And he said, if you take a look, at the first clarinet part, it can be played by the first trumpet. I mean, he had those parts so interchanged that if you didn't have the people that cover the parts, that you could kind of pass them around. Though he never explained it that way, he said a sharp director would have picked that up and been able to do that. So, there were pioneers in that whole flex band.
Oh, yeah, world. He was a master orchestrator, and so was Claire Grunman. He was another one.
When he wasn't writing crossword puzzles for the New York Times, right? That's what his real job was. You know that, right?
No, I did not.
Yeah, he was a crossword puzzle writer for the New York Times.
Wow.
Well, so I got to do this, man. You're at VanderCook. I love the school. You love the school. So I need the time. I need the commercial. Okay. I'm a high school band director. I got a student who I feel needs to go into music ed, or I got a student who's expressed an interest in becoming a music teacher. Tell me why they should consider VanderCook, and what, in your opinion, makes VanderCook so different, besides getting the chance to work with you, which would be reason enough to go to VanderCook. But tell me what you think.
Or you're too kind. Well, it's what sold me on VanderCook. I mean, the bottom line is you're going to learn by doing. That's what VanderCook is all about: practical, hands-on. So all the students, as you know, learn to play and teach 19 different instruments. And it's not just you take brass techniques for a semester and you're done. It's all divided out. So you take high brass techniques for a semester, and that's just French horn and trumpet. And then you take a methods course that shows you how to teach what you just learned how to play. And this is the way it works for every instrument in the band, plus all the string instruments, plus percussion, plus voice. So one of the things that, unfortunately, when I started teaching, I had to figure out on the job how to teach bassoon, because I took my woodwind techniques, but Ruth Rose, my gosh, she is like a wizard the way she's doing bassoon right now. And I hear those percussionists playing bassoon and playing scales. I'm like, my gosh, it's like, what better way to learn how to teach? So these percussionists that get in front of their kids are going to be able to do this, plus every student has to play a secondary instrument in a major ensemble. So I think it's like 2 semesters. You have to play at least 2 semesters in the band. Is that what it is, Charlie?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It
So
was.
yeah, and that it still is. Same thing with the orchestra. So not only do you learn the techniques, you learn how to teach it, but now you're going to play your choice of secondary instrument in a primary ensemble. I mean, so talk about learning how to teach. I mean, that alone to me is worth it. But then, like conducting, we were talking about the importance of student conductors. All the students that take that advanced conducting course, what do? They get to rehearse and prepare a piece of music to perform at a student conductor concert. I remember when I was there was a rehearsal before I accepted the position. There was a rehearsal for the student conductor concert. I was like, this is phenomenal that they can actually prepare, again, music that they could use. So they get to do that. Really, VanderCook prepares its students in a comprehensive way, unlike anything that I've ever seen. And when a student graduates from college, rarely will they just have an all band gig. You'll have that chorus class you're going to have to teach, or that guitar class, or the string class. And when a principal interviews and says, okay, well, we want you as our band director, but do you know how to teach strings? Check. Yes. Well, can you teach choir? Check. Yes. Can you teach marching band? Check. That marching band methods course, it's like I give them everything. I learned to win those championships in Florida. All the techniques, everything. And then you mentioned about the rehearsals. That symphonic band, I look at it as a lab band. And I'm constantly, in fact, you probably noticed, I'm always probing them. Why did we do this? Somebody tell me. And what did you notice when I had the saxophone and the flute play? And how did we get the C sharp on the alto sax to match the high E natural on flute? What are the tendencies, and how do we make that work? And of course, I use the harmony director. I've used that since my trip to Japan in 2001, and like that's kind of my secret weapon. And so they learn how to use that. So all these techniques, and I'm constantly asked. It's not about, okay, we just have to prepare a concert. It's more, I'm preparing you to learn how to rehearse and teach, and so it's a constant laboratory environment. Another thing is the VanderCook students get to run the Midwest Clinic. How many other college students in the country get to do that? 0. I didn't even know what the Midwest Clinic was until after 6 years of teaching, and here these college students are behind the scenes at the Midwest Clinic, experiencing it like no other students in the country. It's, there's a ton of great band programs in the Chicagoland area that they can observe. There's a large concentration of really great high school band programs, just, right around Chicago. And a lot of our kids, they tech for those groups and that sort of thing. Downtown Chicago, you got the CSO 5 minutes away. The faculty is fantastic. They're dedicated. And the cool thing about the faculty is everybody has their niche and they do it really well, and their heart is in the right place. There's a heart to teach future teachers, unlike anything I've ever seen. And it really, for me, is an honor to be able to teach with these people. And you probably know this, but we're now offering some scholarship opportunities that weren't existing before. Like we now have the VanderCook Scholars Program. Do you know about that?
No, tell me.
So the VanderCook Scholars Program is basically free tuition for all 4 years for the top clarinet player that applies, or the top flute player, the top oboe player. So there's a scholarship available for VanderCook Scholar, one for every instrument across the board, strings, choir, the same thing. So that's just recently been put into place. In fact, it's about to kind of take effect. And now there are early decision incentives. So you can get, for example, free tuition for the first year if you apply early and make an early decision. The performance side of it, which, I always say we're a music ed school and we're not doing music performance, but for those music ed students that want to excel and continue to sort of have a focus on the performance side, we now will offer a performer certificate, which is what I did when I was at Florida. I was a music ed student, but I did all the playing requirements for the music performance degree, which got me the performer certificate. And that performer certificate basically is an acknowledgement of, yeah, this person plays at a very high level. And that performer certificate helped me to get into grad school to study music performance at IU. So VanderCook is now offering that performer certificate that can be, you can be in that concurrently with the music ed track, to do that performance. So those are just a few things. So it's just a very exciting time, with the opportunities that students have. But like I said, I have never seen an institution that prepares its students to teach like VanderCook. I mean, comprehensively across the board. I keep saying, I wish I would have had this when I was an undergrad, so that I wouldn't have had to figure all of these things out after I started teaching, and I always preach that to the students. And so I think they're very fortunate, and hopefully we'll continue to build and grow from that.
There's no question that you're going to continue to build and grow, Alex. I mean, as long as you're there, I mean, they're on a great path, man. The trajectory is great. And I'm just so proud of you and what you're doing. And as soon as this COVID thing passes and you can get them back in get all their butts back in the seats, I know it's just going to take off. And just so proud of you and great to know you and get to know you. Thanks for being such a good caretaker of that great school. Give Dr. Rosenthal and Ruth Rhodes, Stacy Dolan, Cindy Tovar, all the gang there, a big hello for me. I miss them all.
Yeah, sure will.
And I look forward to seeing you the next time so I can give you a big hug and say thanks, brother. So be good and God bless.
All right, Charlie. Same to you. Thank you so much.
I really like Alex Kaminsky. He's a band director's band director. As he said, he's a lifer, and he's in the trenches, and he's doing a great job at VanderCook College of Music, and I wish him nothing but the best. Alex, you're a good one, and they're lucky to have you. Keep up the great work, buddy. Hope to see you soon. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll be back with more great conversations. Until the next time, this is your host, Charlie Mangini, saying thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.